All right, I'm here with Nicole Young to talk about her classes in the upcoming Photoshop Virtual Summit 4. Hey, Nicole, thanks for
Okay,
jumping in.
sure. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, one of the classes that you're doing, which is, I think, I got to say, I think this is the first of all the virtual summits, is actually
Mhm.
Photoshop for beginners. I mean, we have obviously some sessions that are aimed at beginners or they kind of cover a gamut, but I thought it was a
Mhm.
really cool idea to have a class that's really just geared at people who are just starting out. So, what kind of things will you be talking about in your class?
Yeah, sure. Well, to just to kind of start out, I think we talked about it a little bit at after the last summit, where we want to make sure that this summit feels approachable to a lot of people. And sometimes jumping into something like this, it can be a little, you might think that there are things you're not going to be able to grasp, So I was like, well, this year I'll create a Photoshop for beginners class. And there's only so much you can cram into the amount of time that we have for these
Right.
classes, but I did my best. And I talk about the workspace, which I can remember when I started using Photoshop. You get into this, you have this big workspace with all of these things, and you're like, there's too much going on. But it's really easier to use when you kind of nail it down to just the handful of panels and all the things that you may want to use. And there's really only a few of them. So
Right.
I show how to set up the workspace. That's the very first thing. So you can kind of just pull the panels that you might want to use, such as like the layers panel, the adjustments panel. And of course, things when you're doing some of the other classes in the summit, some of the other instructors are going to have panels that I'm not mentioning in here because there's a
Sure.
lot of different ways you can use Photoshop. But I tried to find a good assortment of panels that's great for, let's say, just kind of basic photo editing. And I
Hmm.
show you how to get those panels arranged and even how you can save it as a workspace so you can access it down the road or the next time you open up Photoshop. So that's kind of where I start, and then from there it goes into talking about layers, and I discuss a little bit of pixel layers, and kind of how they work and what to watch out for, and also adjustment layers because that's a big thing on adding adjustments to your photos, especially if you want to work non-destructively, which I think most people do when they're really getting into using
Sure.
Photoshop. So
Nice.
yeah.
I like the fact that you said the words things to look out for, because I think as much as it's nice to know what the tools do, there's a lot of little potential gotchas in Photoshop. So to kind of point out, be aware of this along the way is, I think it's
Yeah,
very important for sure.
sure.
Now, if someone is considers themselves a little bit past beginner, will they still find some things you think that they'd be find useful?
I mean, I would say if you would call yourself like an advanced Photoshop user, this is probably all stuff you already know. But as somebody who teaches Photoshop and photography, I still, if I'm watching someone else's course, everybody has a different way of approaching things. So I always find something useful or something new or just a different way of doing something that I wouldn't have thought of when I watch other people teach Photoshop. Because I consider myself a fairly advanced Photoshop user. There's still a lot that I don't know. It's kind of like, they say the brain, I don't think it's true, but they say the brain, you only use like 10% of it. And I've always kind of said the same thing about Photoshop because people of all different types of, design and graphics and artists and all sorts of people use Photoshop. And of course, a lot of the people who are going to be watching these courses are going to be photographers. So, that's kind of what I kind of cater this towards. And that's where I like shine in Photoshop is
Sure.
editing photographs.
Right. Great. And now the other class you're doing, which is a
Mhm.
topic near and dear to my heart, is the power of smart objects. And
Yeah.
I've from the very first day I saw smart objects, for some reason I just went, yes, this this resonates with me. So what's this class about?
So, first of all, I talk about what smart objects are and why you might want to use them because if you haven't used smart objects before, you may be aware of their existence, but you don't really understand how powerful they can be. And I think I use smart objects every single time I use Photoshop because I'm either dragging a photo in to up to layer and then it's automatically a smart object, or I'm adding filters to a smart object, So it's I'm obviously not going to get into it all here because I have a full course on showing you how to use it. I have a lot of different examples. I discuss the non-destructiveness of like why that, which is why they're so powerful. You can resize, you can bring a photo in, resize it, and I even show this in the video, like to like basically so it's only like 5 by 5 pixels wide or something crazy like that. Commit that change, and then you can bring it all the way back to its normal size without affecting anything. But that's only one little thing that you can do with smart objects. You can it's really easy to replace photos using templates. Like one example I show in the course is, let's say you want to sell your prints and you want to show, you have like a picture of like a living room, and then you have like all the different sizes of that print on your wall. If you want to swap that out with a different photo, you can do that so easily and so quickly with Smart Objects. So it's a great way to work with templates. I talk about some of the pros and cons of replacing them, and I show some different methods on how to do that. And also, one of the things that I like to do with Smart Objects is edit them with, like, you create a smart object, and then let's say I'm working with a third-party plugin like Luminar or On One or one of those types of different, third-party software applications. You can edit inside of Photoshop. You can create that smart object and then use that filter, jumps out of Photoshop, comes back, but you can still re-edit that same
Mm,
filter again and again. So it's just a really great way to kind of keep your editing in Photoshop non-destructive working with smart objects. They have some pros and cons, but I go
yeah.
over some of those, and but I feel like it's a really good thing. If you're not familiar with them or you've been wanting to kind of learn how they work, this is going to be a really good class for you.
Awesome. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things because it's probably one of the best examples to me of removing the kind of linear nature of editing in Photoshop,
Mhm.
because you're able to do a whole bunch of steps and go, well, let me go back to that filter, smart filter on
Yeah,
that smart object and see what happens now and have it kind of affect everything you've done. And from
yeah,
a both productivity and creativity standpoint, I think there's such an amazing possibility there. So
yeah.
um, I love smart objects.
Me
I was
too.
going to get a t-shirt made that says that someday, because
That would be a good.
probably a very small number of people would buy it,
They'd
but
be like,
those
"What on earth
they
is a
they
smart
would
object?"
they would be like those people that, if what's that expression? If you know, you know. It's
Yeah.
like, it'd be like, yeah, you'd have to go to like a Photoshop convention, and then people would be like,
Right,
ah, yes,
right. Like, me too.
awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing both those classes. I think there's going to be lots of good stuff in there. So thank you for taking the time to give us a bit of an insight as to your upcoming classes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it. All right. We'll see you soon.
Alright,
Thanks.
take care.